first just being mindful of my own feelings and my energy, right? So, giving myself a space to vent and say what I needed to say, and then give it back to God, um, and pray, for His guidance and His strength. I didn't only have to be present for my staff and give them a healthy space to express, how they felt, and be mindful that, I'm always mindful that I don't, not to make assumptions that we're all feeling the same thing, as well, which can be extremely hard, especially, with something like yesterday, because in my heart of hearts and deep in my mind, like, I always pray that I don't have that staff member that pops out of left field with, well, I feel like it was all right. Because those are the things that make you as a leader decide, is this going to be my hill? Right? Is this the hill that I'm choosing? So for me, I'm always cognizant of that based on who I have, because I do understand that if I choose that to be my hill, I won't be able to be present, for why I'm here, and that's my kids. So made myself available to them as well, so that they knew they had a safe space, um, to come as they were, to express how they felt, so that we can think through it together. And the worst piece of it all is knowing that part of that feeling of emotion is going to be about feeling powerless, right? So brought it back to, what do we need to do as a people to empower ourselves and build our communities, um, to not only just be in positions of affecting change, but be in positions where we feel protected and not powerless. So that was a lot of my conversation throughout the day with both, adults and my young people.
Thank you for sharing that, April. Again, there's so many emotions, and I think it's very important for us to at least acknowledge those emotions and know that that is part of human nature. But those of us as leaders, unfortunately, can't necessarily wallow in it, but for so long. That it's very, very important that we acknowledge that these things are real. It's great that we we shared what we shared. Most of us who shared through Instagram and Facebook and other ways. It's great that we were able to do that.
Because of your privilege, you might not have experienced racism, but that doesn't mean that racism hasn't existed in America, just because you haven't experienced it. So you can't agree with a white man who hasn't experienced racism and say that this is not America, when he, it's just too different. We don't want people to think that there are two sides of America. And the other quote was from someone from, I don't know, Black Lives Matter, I guess, had posted something or said something around and was like, actually, yeah, this is America. We know this to be true. But I mean, I had my feelings about it. I knew from the very beginning, if you were Black and you were up scaling a wall, breaking down a fence, it would have been Bloody Wednesday, right? Like, we would have saw all kinds of dead bodies slain in front of the Capitol if it was a Black Lives Matter. And now, you didn't even have to be Black Lives Matter protest. If it was just Black people that were there, the outcome would have been very different. And I think the emotions that it brought up for me was more or less about just the notion of this continuous white privilege. This the same white privileged person who will show up, who demands to go first in line or think that they're the most important thing when they're not. And I think until we start addressing white privilege and white supremacy when we see it, and stop being afraid of saying what it is. Like, you think you have a privilege because you're white, or you're superior to me because of the color of your skin. I think the less it becomes, something that people want to fight against.
So what I want us to continue to do now by way of this conversation is, not only do I want you to share your emotions about it, I also want to hear what some of you have talked to your kids about today. I want to hear some more of that.
So going back to what has been said, and I think we have all said that when we hear talking heads or elected officials say that this isn't who we are, it's like, well, no, this is exactly who we are. But I also think of Gil Scott Heron when he said in an interview back in the 80s that he says, like, honestly, to his opinion, and it's when it comes to Black people in the United States of America, we are in fact the real Americans because we are the only ones that have carried the process through the process. So when it comes to, well, what does it mean to use the vote? We use that. What does it mean to, if you prescribe to Christianity, what does it mean to carry the Bible? We've done that too. So regarding changing the narrative, Dennis, that you said, that is part of that. When we talk about our experience here, it tends to be this other thing, as opposed to, no, we are in fact American. The same way that, I mean, listen, like the sweater that I'm wearing right now, Spelman, it represents Spelman and Morehouse. That's a very American thing. It can't happen really anywhere else. What you saw yesterday is a rejection of something that is very American, which is a rejection of Black people in the United States of America using the systems that were put in place to their full power. Yesterday was a rejection of switching Georgia blue, a rejection of everything that has been built up, not only for the past 5 years, but that's a totally different conversation. But this is part of my 2 cents here, and I would like to hear other people just, your thoughts on this, which is switching the narrative is looking at what happened yesterday as a rejection of something that is very American, and that is Black people inside of the United States of America.
And I know for a fact, as a principal, and the things that we do and the way we look, people are looking for us to make the change that we were talking about.
Amani?
Yes, thank you, family, and thank you again. I'll be brief. I had a piece of information I wanted to share. It's a book. Again, my name is Armani Scott. I'm the attorney for OSG. I'm also a filmmaker and a producer. This 2 hours every Thursday is probably one of the best times of my week to come in and to fellowship with you all and to support you all and the things that Dennis is doing with you all. There's a book, We Have Taken a City, Racial Massacre and Coup of Wilmington, 1898. And I think when we talk about disinformation, we talk about, as Principal April was speaking about earlier, I believe another Principal Asia Johnson was speaking about this as well, the disinformation. And I think there are, when we talk about this is not America, in 1898, Wilmington, North Carolina, okay, there was a duly elected multiracial coalition running Wilmington, North Carolina, where African Americans were the treasurer of that city in 1898, had a tremendous, the mayor of the town was white, where Mayor of Wilmington at the time was white, but the reason he was mayor was because he had a coalition government with African Americans in that city. People talk about Tulsa, Oklahoma, and they don't know what happened. Only now they're finding out about it. I think some of these historical events, these touchstones, as Dennis was talking about, African American people, when we talk about the narrative of who we are, we know we're great. We talk about, Tulsa, Oklahoma, we had Black Wall Street. We had like 100 Black Wall Streets in this country. Manhattan Beach in California, right, was owned by African American people, right? You know how much that land is worth right now? So again, these stories have been suppressed from our children for a particular reason, so that the narrative of the nigger can proliferate, so that the narrative of Black people can't do business together, Black people aren't good at math and science. All of these false narratives proliferate because our children don't know the history of this country. When we all say, oh yeah, this is America, we know this America, it's one thing to have an experience with a police officer, or 2, or 10. It's something totally different to be able to go back to the 3/5 compromise and be able to trace the decisions and the policies and the history on one track, but also in that same tracing, see the brilliance of African-American people. When do we think about 1898 and think that in 1898, Black people in this country were really doing the thing big? We're running a major city on the East Coast. Is that a part of the narrative when we think about ourselves on a visceral level? And that's why I think when we talk about that narrative and changing it, I think about James Baldwin as well. He says, I'm not your nigger, right? Who created the nigger? What is this thing called a nigger, right? And I think yesterday, finally, the real niggers stood up. And it's about not just saying, oh, that's the nigger over there. It's about, again, as Principal Dennis says, it's because just pointing the finger at someone else doesn't help us. We are empowering our children. And part of that, again, if we're going to go back and excavate this history, we're going to excavate and we're going to talk about George Washington Carver and Ida B. Wells and Marcus Garvey. And we're going to put our people in the proper context. As the brother just said earlier as well, what is an American? Jimi Hendrix is American, is all American, right? And I think that narrative that if this country is to be, it's not going to be without us.
Hey guys, how you doing? It's been a while.
Yeah.
So just to answer your question, Dennis, I was fine. It was meant to happen the way it happened. It was meant to play out the way it played out. I mean, if you are a history buff, you know, it was bound to happen. My biggest concern or kind of like challenge, you know, I was mulling over last night and well into this morning, was, you know, understanding my role as a leader. And I'm hearing a lot of you speaking about how, you know, you were very proud of your students and making sure that they were given the space to process the day's events. And that's definitely formidable. I think that what I wanted for myself, though, as this is my second year as a principal, is to really make sure that I approach this situation in a way that modeled leadership, right, to my staff. So I always think of myself as a supervisor of adults. I'm definitely a school principal. I have, you know, children. I love my babies and my students, but at the end of the day, my role, my number one job and priority is supervising the teachers and the faculty and the staff in my building. And it wasn't until I saw those images, the noose, the Confederate flag, the gentleman wearing a t-shirt that said Camp Auschwitz, right? The swastikas, the very clear symbols of white supremacy, the tattoos, all these things, the Trump flag that now correlates to being the new Confederate flag, the American flag that is now the new Confederate flag. And I thought to myself, this is it. I have my in. So I shared an email in the first sentence, and I was like, if I get slack for it, I don't care. But the first sentence was, and I'm looking at the headlines, right, was, oh, you know, mobsters, pro-Trump supporters breached the White House. They didn't, because the Capitol Police let them in and took selfies with them and held their hand and escorted them out. But the issue was, let's name it, let's start there. And for me as a leader, if I can't show up and name it for exactly what it was, then I'm going to lose my staff, and it won't help me to figure out who's who on my team too, because they do teach Black and brown kids. So I want to make sure who's in front of my children. So my first sentence of my email was, white supremacists breached the nation's capital, period, end of story. And then I was like, yeah, you know, and I expect you to do the whatever. And so then I waited to see how they would take that, popped into classrooms, and they taught my kids. I mean, but my biggest concern was, did my entire staff that served my Black and brown children understand and walk away with the same level of disgust? Because at the end of the day, I supervise adults. Because if you're going to serve Black and brown kids, you need to be 100% on board with anti-racism ideologies. You need to be 100% on board with ideas around social justice. Don't just give me lip service at the interview. Don't just do what is it, dog and pony show, horse and pony. I'm not from here, so I don't know what the saying is. And when I pop into a classroom, I need to know that in your heart of hearts, this is how you feel. So I don't ever have to wake up when I watch the news and the next morning wonder, what are they going to tell my kids? At the end of the day, I'm going to know what you're going to tell my kids, because I made sure that my entire staff is culturally sound and sensitive to the needs of my Black and brown babies.
No, that's you know, I really am glad that one, that you spoke, Arabelle, because you know that first sentence in your email, again, it takes a lot of courage to start off an email that way. It is great to see you, Marissa.
Happy New Year, everyone. I'm Marissa Forrest. I'm the principal of Mount Hawthorne Middle School in Brownsville. So yesterday was really interesting because around 1 o'clock, my staff, we were having a PD, and our PD was around trauma-informed practices. And we were talking about the amount of trauma students experienced over the 10 months, right? From COVID-19 to the Black Lives, police brutality movement, and just, the disproportionate rate of African Americans dying from COVID, and, just some of the trauma they're experiencing. And about 2 minutes after we get off our PD session, which was amazing, I see all these alerts on my phone, and here comes another level of trauma that we have to address, and it's like it's nonstop. So I thought about it for a while, like, what am I gonna say, what are we gonna do? And I crafted an email to my staff talking about, what we learned just that day about trauma informed practices and how we need to approach our students and give them a space to talk. And this morning I decided, what, let me create some sort of Padlet. Like, I'm a very tech savvy, like I love to use technology and as much as possible. And so I created this Padlet that, I do a morning message every day. And I posted the Padlet, not really knowing if kids would take to it. And it was just like posted there, like, if you'd like to share any feelings, if you have any questions, anything that is connected to what happened yesterday. And I posted that Padlet like around 8:30. By like 8:40, there was like already 20 posts on there. As a matter of fact, through this call right now, I'm still seeing pings on my laptop because kids are still posting on the Padlet. And I mean, some of them are extremely long posts, and they're commenting to each other, and they're posting pictures. And the point is that sometimes, kids are at home and their families aren't really, they're like, they don't really see them as people to have conversations with, right? Like, they just talk about it with other adults, or they're on the phone, or they're watching the news, and the kids are just in the background. But we gave the kids a space to speak about it, and it was so amazing. And I hopped into a few classes today, and the kids were just going off. It was like, we couldn't really get to curriculum today, right? They were really talking about this. But one student said something that really just kind of put me in a space. And he said, I don't know if you guys saw the video of the lady yesterday that who got maced. And she was like, they maced me. And, they asked her why. And she was like, I was trying to get in the Capitol. It's a revolution. And he said, we live in Brownsville, and this whole area is turning, a whole bunch of white people is moving into our area. And I'm walking down the street and they're looking at me like I'm the thug and I don't belong. And like, I'm about to commit a crime. Meanwhile, this lady is barging into the Capitol building. She's the thug, but they'll never see that difference, and for a young child, he's 12 years old, for him to say that and for him to realize like there's absolutely a difference in treatment between him and a white woman, it's just there's so much that we have to do. And my team and I, we met today to kind of debrief the process. And what we came up with was, because we love to do community circles, and I didn't want to do an impromptu community circle today without really like planning out. And so what we decided was, next week we're going to have a community circle / community forum, and we're calling it the power of influence, because everything that has happened is because of influence, whether negative influence or positive influence. And what we wanted to do, what we want to do is create different breakout rooms for kids to go in to talk about some of these issues that have been impacting them over the last 10 months. So
No, I appreciate you sharing that, Marissa. And again, maybe, make sure you go over there and follow Principal Forrest on Instagram, because she most likely gonna have to do a video or a live on that. So looking forward to seeing what that looks like, Marissa. No, thank you.